guys hear me there in the back? Should I better use the microphone? What's better?
Yeah.
Better the
Whatever
microphone?
you feel.
Okay. Well, I can just switch maybe back and forth. So thanks a lot, first of all, to the Culture Diplomacy team for inviting me, for having me here. And thanks a lot to you guys also to, spend your time of a Friday afternoon to be here with me. I hope, or I'm sure it's not going to be boring and hopefully very interesting. And today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. And basically, I'm going to share with you what I think are some tips of what artists can learn from entrepreneurs and business people, and what can business people also learn from artists, which is something that some people wouldn't believe to happen that easily. In any case, I'm going to go through some points. First, I'm going to, think about a little bit about myself, how I came to be here today, for example, a bit of my credentials, where I come from, what kind of studies I did before, what kind of companies I worked in. Then I'm going to jump into my most recent projects. One of them is called PANTA magazine. I brought some samples. I have 3 samples that I can give away today. So if you guys are interested in independent art, independent magazines, you can have one PANTA. I'm also going to talk about Book a Street Artist, which is my main job, basically, but it's also my main passion. And it's basically a startup based in Berlin, but that was born in Lisbon some years ago. And then we'll jump into the topic of entrepreneurship, where basically I will leave you guys with what I think are 2 tips that can be learned from artists for entrepreneurs, and 2 tips that entrepreneurs can learn from artists. Then at the end we'll have a Q&A. If you guys are already up for asking questions while I speak, you can raise your hands and I'll be happy to answer. I don't mind the interruption. This is I like to go with the flow, so I don't like to be very stiff in my presentation. So I want it to be a more relaxed environment. Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about myself, I was born in Colombia. Bucaramanga is the name of my city. It's like northeast, close to Venezuela. I'm 35 years old by now, almost 36 now. I have a bachelor in civil engineering. I come from an engineering family. All my uncles, my aunts, my father, they're all engineers. So I went for civil engineering because I thought that was my call as part of my family. But then I quickly realized, after having some experience in some super cool projects on engineering, that engineering was not my thing. And I needed to expand a little bit my, level of knowledge, let's say. And I had the chance to go to Stanford for a short summer period to study business. While I did that, I realized that business would give me a lot of opportunities in different kinds of fields, and I liked that idea because I was not sure what I wanted to do for my life. And so after that, I got accepted into a master's program in Lisbon. Nova Business School of Economics is called, and there I had the chance to do a dual, master's program with Erasmus University, specifically the Rueda School of Management in the Netherlands. All this to say that I have a background of a mix of engineering and business, but not really arts. And so how did I happen to end up in arts? Well, first I started by working in big companies, big corporations, because after you study business, at least that's my opinion, a lot of people, a lot of business students want to go into either consulting, the financial world, or nowadays startups. Myself, I worked in the known sales. I did also finance in Philips Electronics in Amsterdam. I did some marketing in L'Oreal, and I ended up in a startup called Housetrip that was bought by TripAdvisor. And that's where I got into the startup scene. But until then, I never got into the artistic scene until I found, or I met my co-founder, and she had the idea of putting together a magazine where we would collect stories from artists that have an impact in society. We call them artivism or activists. I'm going to show you some examples. So I have 3 copies here, 4 actually. If you guys are interested in having a copy for free, I'll be more than happy to give them away. And this is PANTA, it's a magazine that is edited in Lisbon, printed here in Berlin, and basically collects stories of artists that have social, environmental, or political message. PANTA went viral after the 4th issue. Today we have 13 issues, and it has over 3 million readers online. We've had great stories, great interviews with PANTA. Unfortunately, because the business of print magazines is super complicated, we have to stop PANTA last year. So right now it's on a pause. I wouldn't say it's dead yet, but it's complicated. But still, you can. This is the last PANTA, by the way. So
It's going to be a collector item.
yeah, could be. Yeah, I hope so. At some point, but I hope it's not the last one. So let's see if it happens that we print some more PANTAs later on. And so yeah, that's PANTA. Then, like I said, you know, on a regular basis, on a daily basis, I work in another startup on a project that we call Book a Street Artist, which basically means that we take artists from the streets, put them online, and have them be ready to get booked by mainly companies. We started in the city of Lisbon, in the streets of Lisbon, with guys like this. And we realized that guys like this, even though they're super talented, super skillful, they have big problems because, first of all, art on the streets is illegal. So no matter if you're a musician, if you're a painter, or performer, or whatever, you're not supposed to do art on public spaces. And second of all, they don't have the chance or the skills to manage themselves or look for gigs because they're just artists. And that's the excuse in a way, but that's the reality as well. And so, you know, we detected all these issues. The work is illegal, they're underestimated, they're overseen. At the same time, they're very talented and ambitious, but they're not managers and they are not easy to find. And so we said, okay, if the work is illegal on the streets, let's try to make it legal. And we went to the city of Lisbon, and after, you know, a lot of back and forth, we finally got to meet one of the biggest political leaders of the city of Lisbon. And after 2 years of back and forth emailing, phone calling, and meetings, we managed to abolish a fee that artists had to pay to play, perform on the streets. That was around 200 euros per month, which is crazy because these guys have no, basically, protection from. So if I pay 200 euros to play on the streets, I'm contributing to the city for something, but they're not giving me back anything. Basically, that was a fee that was not really proper or fair. We managed to abolish it. However, it took us more than 2 years to do that. If we wanted to have a scalable idea or business, we would have to spend so many years to do the same thing in many different cities. We're always depending on the government. That was too complicated. So we decided to say, okay, let's throw to the garbage the idea of making street art legal, and let's focus on another problem, that is, artists are not good managers, and they're not easy to book, because you cannot find them easily. And so, with our business background, business knowledge, we started reaching out to brands and saying, look, we have these awesome underground artists that are super talented, and that can be booked now through us. Just give me a call and book it. There was no platform back then. It was just, call me and I'll connect you with the artist, and then you have a booking. That's how brands like Hard Rock Cafe started booking this kind of guys. So this is a fire performance booked by Hard Rock Cafe in the city of Lisbon. After this, we started getting a lot of attention in the media. We were in several magazines, we were in TV, and we even, get started. Okay. Okay. we were on TV, and we even won a startup prize, or several competitions. You know, back then, the city of Lisbon went through a lot of economical hurdles, and we realized that if we wanted to grow the project, we needed to go to a more stable country. And so we applied to a startup accelerator that is called Access Spring Plug and Play. You guys know what a startup accelerator is?
No.
No, so basically, you go with an idea to a program that normally lasts 3 months, 6 months, and they accelerate your growth. So they give you tips on how to prove your concept, prove your idea, your hypothesis, get customers, make a marketing plan, make a financial plan, and so on and so on. And sometimes they give you money also, in our case, for 5% of the company. And this is a program organized by Access Spring, which is a media house here in Germany, and Plug and Play, which is an organization from California. So we got into Germany through the German market through Access Spring and Plug and Play, which opened a lot of doors for us. And it was very beneficial because not only they gave us money, but they gave us a lot of mentorship on how to grow our idea. With this opportunity, we managed to establish what, step by step, and of course I'm accelerating in time here, it's not like it happened like this, there was a lot of work and years of work in this, but basically with their help and the mentors' help, we managed to come up with what we have today, that is an online matchmaking platform to hire artistic services. And I'm going to explain you how it works. So imagine Max is a brand manager, and he goes to our platform and searches for, some artist that he wants for his product launch party next week. And then he finds the artist, he sends an inquiry, he asks for a free quote, the artist receives the inquiry on his email or his phone, and he sends a quote to the client. And then after negotiation back and forth, the client can pay online. There is a contract generated by the system that protects the artist and the client against any cancellation. And the booking basically is confirmed. And that's it. So that's a simplistic way to explain how booking happens online. So you don't need, in theory, a manager. Now, let me give you some examples of some of the bookings or some of the clients that work with us. This is Cisco in Barcelona. They booked, this drumming group for a big conference that happens every February every year. This is Katias. They book a graffiti artist to paint. This is a drone photo. So they painted. The artist painted this whole mural with their brand. Of course, it's commercial work. Why is it skipping some slides? Okay, this is skipping some slides. Okay, this is another example. You guys know what tape art is? Tape art?
We are not artistic.
No problem. So it's art made with tape. Yeah? So instead of painting a wall, you use tape. This is a tape art installation. So you see the people here. This is a messe here in Berlin. And they built an installation made out of 3 kilometers of tape. It's the largest tape art installation ever built. And basically the installation tries to replicate how skin is shaped. So you see the little skin structure epidermis, because this was a skin conference in the Messe of Berlin. So this is a bit more artistic than the one before, but still commercial. So far, last year, for example, we brought more than 1 million euros in jobs to independent artists through our platform. And we have worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. As you can see, anything from online brands like Twitter, Instagram, Airbnb, to fashion brands like Diesel, or automobile brands like Seat and Mercedes-Benz, and also very important agencies like OEB, BBDO, and stuff.
May I ask something?
Yeah, please.
Who is doing the field work in order to collect the artist contacts on the street?
Yeah, so at the beginning we did a lot of field work, and we got a name in the street art scene, if you want to call it like that. And nowadays a lot of artists recommend us, so we get a lot of inbound organic applications. We don't go and look for them unless there's a special request for a specific artist that we don't have in our network. And so then we go online and we have our own tricks to find them on Instagram and stuff like that.
Okay, no, because they are the really, really poor one, I will say that, they are not connected still.
That's what a lot of people think, but the streets, if you think about it, are just a marketing channel for them to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like they are living on the streets or not eating proper food. They actually make a lot of money on the streets, first of all. Second of all, they use the streets as a marketing channel, because if they're good, they can go viral online. If you're a street musician, for example, that make music out of kitchen tools, in Berlin, in Warschauer Straße, in the summer, you make a lot of money. A lot of videos are made, they go online, sometimes they go viral, and then, so it is a marketing channel. So they are online, a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them are.
You didn't need them,
At the beginning, yes.
Yeah, at the beginning, yes. But nowadays we have over 1,000 artists, and I don't know them all personally. Yeah. So that all to say that my experience brought me to realize that, so while I work with a lot of these brands, a lot of business people, and at the same time a lot of creatives and a lot of artists, I realized that there were a lot of common points between arts and entrepreneurs, or artists and entrepreneurs. But even if there were a lot of common points, a lot of times it seemed to me that they spoke a different language. There was a hole in the communication. They didn't understand each other. And that's when we started thinking, there are things that entrepreneurs can learn from artists, and at the same time there are things that artists should and could learn from entrepreneurs or from business people. And we came up, we didn't come up with this concept as such, but we came up with this talk and a series of educational tips for artists and entrepreneurs based on our experience, and we call it Artrepreneurship. So I'm going to start with 2 tips for entrepreneurs. So imagine so how many entrepreneurs do we have here actually? Is there anyone that considers himself, herself an entrepreneur? Or does anyone?
Me.
Yourself? Okay, good. Yeah. Does anyone have a project maybe? A project in mind?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Good, so we have some entrepreneurs, some entrepreneurial spirit at least. Do we have any artists, maybe? 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have more artists in the room than this. Okay, so we have an entrepreneur and an artist at the same time. Good. All right, because that was my next question. We have an artist and an entrepreneur at the same time. So I'm going to start with 2 tips that I think artists can teach entrepreneurs. And I'm going to only give 2 because we've discovered maybe 5 or 6, but for this presentation, I just want to share 2 of them. So the first one is, or let's start under the water. Have you guys seen this before?
No.
It's an underwater museum. It's made by Jason Taylor. He's a British sculptor and environmentalist. he creates this kind of stuff.
Where is it installed?
This one I know, yeah.
There are several ones. There is one close to Mexico, one close to Spain, as far as I know, and maybe there's a couple more.
Inside the museum?
No, this is
Ah, it's really underwater, it's an installation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an installation, so
But
basically,
in real
so basically he creates like human-sized sculptures. So this is like maybe my size, with pH neutral materials. And so with time, these installations become actually part of the ecosystem, and they activate life in places where life was already under threat, because as you know, the oceans, for the most of the cases, most of the parts of the oceans are under threat. So what he does is basically create this idea of a long-term purpose in his art, without necessarily thinking only on the monetary gain, on the money. For me, that's a very strong message. Not only the photo, but the purpose of the art piece itself goes beyond the money. For me, that's a very strong message for entrepreneurs. When you're in the startup world, like myself, especially in the tech startup world, the Twitters, the Facebooks, and so on, in Berlin especially, they all talk about money. They all talk about an exit. Have you guys heard about exits? So an exit is, you're supposed to have an exit strategy. That means that when you build a company from day one, you need to know how you're going to get rid of your company. That's the first question an investor would ask you. What's your exit strategy? If you don't know that, then they would think you're not serious enough, which I think is bullshit, to be honest. Because if you build something with purpose, it's like your baby. It's not the first thing you think about to sell it. You just want to see it growing and having purpose and an impact beyond money. So for me, that's the first tip that artists teach entrepreneurs. Then, this is the second tip, have you guys heard about the brick spacer? Okay, he's not a super known artist like the one before, but he does very cool stuff. And I'll show you what he does. But it doesn't show there.
Esteban, maybe you can help.
How can I show it there?
Esteban, can you help me?
That's it. So it's very short, but if you want to see it again, I can play it again.
Und deswegen ist auch so, dass auch weltweit durch das Prinzip hier
Sorry?
Konsum wird stark besteuert, Investitionen sehr wenig besteuert.
I was going back on the other one.
You went back too much. No.
One more?
No, this is again this.
This one.
This.
Very beautiful. It's amazing.
So his name is Brick Spacer. Check him out on Instagram. I don't work with him, so I'm not promoting him. I don't know him, so it's not under my control. I don't want, he's not being booked on my platform, so I don't have any financial interest.
Where is he coming from?
I think he's Russian,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. He's one of these artists that doesn't show his face on Instagram, so I have no idea. I don't know much about him.
Well, but to make this installation, so to say,
Yeah, well,
already you need to really do something, no?
yeah, I think he's a media, like a digital media
He's a
artist,
digital.
so
And
it's-
it's not a live, it was like only a vision?
No, it's CGI.
Ah, but
so it's a digital,
okay.
exactly.
Ah,
It looks
okay.
really good, it's like, it looks real, and a lot of people are like, wow, how do you do that? But of
there is
course
no
this guy
shadows.
uses, latest technology.
There was no
and
shadows in the floor.
I don't know exactly what he uses, but he definitely creates a wow moment. And the point here is that,
This is.
I think the purpose, or one of the main purpose of artists in our society is to create this wow moment, this fantasy that other professions or individuals cannot create because of their natural, fact-based positions. So imagine you're a journalist or a scientist, and you're writing a paper on whatever. You cannot play with fantasy or with fiction. You have to write fact-based stuff. Otherwise, people wouldn't recognize you as a serious professional. Instead, when you look at artists, you're always looking for what is he going to come up with? What crazy stuff are they going to come up with? Because artists can play with fantasy. And I think entrepreneurs should innovate with fantasy more than ever. As entrepreneurs, we're in a very special position of we're half creators, half business people in a way. An entrepreneur creates stuff from scratch. So we should innovate, create through fantasy. There's no other position as far as I'm concerned. Maybe there are, but in this case, entrepreneurs is for me a very clear way of, use the fantasy of the artist to create your vision of your company, of your project, while being, commercially driven, so you're sustainable in this, capitalistic world. So that's my second tip for entrepreneurs from artists. Now let's look at 2 tips for artists, since the room is more filled with artists than entrepreneurs. And you guys tell me if you think they're good ideas. Maybe some of you find them too simple. It depends on how developed you are as an artist / business, because I believe every artist should be sort of a brand. But yeah, so at first I want to show you a startup that is called Ecosia. Have you guys heard about Ecosia?
No.
One person? No? 2, 3? Okay, you're users of Ecosia, or yeah? Okay, good. So basically what Ecosia does is they were super brave to say, okay, fuck Google, we're gonna build a better, search engine. And imagine you as an entrepreneur trying to stand in front of Google and saying, I'm gonna beat you. It's very complicated, super complex. Google is like a monster, super complicated to think about defeating Google. But what they did is they claim that for every search that you make on Ecosia, they plant a tree. So up to the moment where I took that screenshot, that was today, they planted more than 84 million trees so far since they started. And for me, that's important, an important message for artists. Why? Because you need to find your USP as an artist. What does that mean?
Unique selling point.
Yeah, exactly. So do you guys know what a USP is? It's a unique selling point, unique selling proposition. What makes you unique? So I would mention this to some artist friends that I have, and they would say, oh, I'm unique. I mean, my style is unique. No one else does what I do, and And then I challenge him and say, are you sure? Maybe you think you're unique, but maybe a lot of the people around you don't really think that. So why don't you challenge yourself and make a competitor's analysis? Even though you think you're unique, you probably have a lot of competition around you, and you're not unique enough. So as an artist, you should be able to define clearly what's your USP, just like Ecosia does with their business. And then secondly, and also as important, is a more, yeah, please.
I have a question. Do you think for artists having an ESP is important as well, besides the USP?
Can you repeat that, please?
Do you think that for an artist having an ESP is important as well, besides having a USP?
What is the ESP?
It's like the emotional part of, emotional selling proposition.
I never heard that concept, to be honest, but I believe that, so my opinion is that artists are much more emotionally connected to their surroundings than if you compare them to entrepreneurs.
But this, sorry, I study advertisement. What you say doesn't make any sense. I will tell you why. Because when you are trying to sell something, whatever you're trying to sell, for example, I come from the world of marketing and advertisement. Marketing is based in one thing, happiness. Is based on happiness, and also depending what, from nostalgia. Nostalgia is a Greek word where it comes from ostalgia, is the wound of is the pain of an old wound. That it could be relative similar to happiness. This is the 2 points that you have. So at the end of the day, whatever you do, you have to transfer the idea of happiness.
To emotion.
Or emotion, but emotion.
Everything is ESP.
But
That's what he means.
But in every single emotion that you will have in life, at the end of the day, should be and must be related, even sadness, must be related to happiness. Even sadness can make you happy somehow. You need to know how to touch it. For that reason, at the end of the day, if you don't have this proposal, I don't know, maybe even it's better to remain home. Because you don't have nothing to sell.
But it's emotion.
It's emotion, so
Yeah.
you're still selling something.
Emotion, I am telling you, all emotions at the end of the day, and even the only one that is there is nostalgia.
But that is an emotion, nostalgia in itself.
But at the end of the day, it's
So
happiness.
what he's saying.
But at the end of the day,
everything-
all of them are related to happiness. It's
Unique
the only
selling
one.
point, you need to think about the ESP, everything should be connected to emotion.
Because at the end, what is your unique
That's what
selling
he's
point?
saying.
What is making happy the people? That's it.
See, but the focus, he is putting the focus on the word nostalgia. But nostalgia
No,
is
I gave you an
It's
example.
an emotion. Happiness, fine, relating happiness.
No, I gave you an example with nostalgia,
Yeah, so
okay?
at the end of the day, I believe as an artist, and if I get what she's saying, as an artist, apart from having a unique selling proposition, there's this aspect about my work that is so good, there should be, and you could also have something emotionally, because emotion is something that you could leverage on.
You are not
as an
fighting
artist.
with each other, you are talking about, you are not competing, you are, he's saying this, what he's saying, that in any case, any product has to have an ESP, the USP is an additional thing to ESP, because product that does not reflect any ESP is like stay at home, you say, you don't have a
Because
product.
at the end of the day,
That's what he's
whatever
saying.
you is related in emotion, everything, and as I say, even nostalgia, sadness, everything is based on happiness.
Okay, but he's
That's
trying
the
to
point
be
where I
too
say-
fast philosopher, we understood. We understood.
Everything.
But let's give Mario.
It's making you to spend $1,000 on an iPhone? It's happy making you? No. But there is something that even this sadness that throwing $1,000 something dollars, there is something in this shit that makes me happy. That's the point. Whatever,
But
think
she's
whatever.
asking something else. He gave a tip to an artist that he has to think about a
Yeah, the unique selling point. What it makes you
But she's asking
unique.
him, maybe she's asking if a unique selling point is more important from the emotion, but what is the artist is trying to express, or what about this? That's what she meant, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning, I only took 2 examples for both sides for now, But of course, there's many things that can be taken from the art world into the entrepreneurial scene and then vice versa. I think it's a valid point, but in my opinion, for the little I heard from ESPs, artists need more of this than the ESP, my opinion. But I don't know much about it.
Because they have already the ESP. If not, they would not have created what they are creating. Yeah.
But anyway, so the next point is a bit more financial, managerial. I'm gonna try to make it very simple. It could get very complex if you study into it or go into it. And I'm just gonna take one layer of it. It has many layers, but that is basically trying to understand your numbers as an artist. So, have you heard about the concept cost of acquisition or customer acquisition cost? Yeah. So basically, how much do you pay to get a customer, right? So this is an example of my company. We work mostly with brands. So a lot of brands come through Google. They search something, they find us because we did a lot of SEO.
You can just tell what is SEO?
SEO means search engine optimization.
Okay.
And basically is when there are certain techniques that you can work on your website so it goes up on the Google ranking, so people find you easier. So we did a lot of SEO and we appear very well positioned for many searches. Search in Ecosia, not in Google.
I will definitely try it as
Yeah,
from
try it
today.
out.
Yeah.
I also don't get any commission from Ecosia.
No,
think it's a good
just
example. But yeah, so basically we have different kinds of customers that come through different channels. And last year we wanted to try a new channel that is Instagram. So we wanted to see if we put effort on Instagram, are we going to get customers or not? So this is an example of a table we did from January till December on Instagram customer acquisition cost. So we put the labor cost and the Instagram ads, we put some money on Instagram ads. And labor cost basically means how much time are you spending on Instagram for your brand, or you as an artist, how much time are you spending per day, per month, and transfer that into euros. So let's say you would like to get paid 20 euros per hour and you work 10 hours per month, that means 200 euros per month. That's the cost that someone would have to pay you for you to work on Instagram, on your own Instagram. This is just a hypothetical number. So you get, so back to the example, we spent 800 euros labor costs, we spent a lot of time posting on Instagram on January, and only 200 euros in this, related to our euro spent. And on average, during the whole year, we spent 200 euros labor costs on Instagram. That means that we spend 200 euros posting on average per month on Instagram. And we spent around 300 euros on average per month on Instagram ads. That means that per month we spent around 500 euros on Instagram, on average, in 2019. Now, on average per month, Instagram brought us 10 customers. That means that 500 euros spent on average, divided in 10 customers, is cost of acquisition of Instagram for our brand was 50 euros per customer.
Per month.
Per month. Per customer. So this means that now I have the customer acquisition cost of Instagram, how much do I pay per customer on Instagram. I would compare that to how much I pay per customer on, for example, Google Ads, or other customers find us through referrals. So our customers refer other customers, and like that we get new customers. That can also be calculated. But if you want to know, like I said, this can be very deep. It can go very specific. If you want to know more about us, I would suggest you Ecosia, not Google, cost of acquisition or customer acquisition cost. But that is basically my last message or my last suggestion from an entrepreneur to all the artists out there to calculate your cost, customer acquisition cost per channel, ideally. Yeah, and that's it. If you guys are more interested in knowing about these technical topics, if you're an artist, for example, and you want to know more or get mentored by us, please reach me. My co-founder is a specialist on this as well. She'll be happy to help any one of you guys if you want to sit down for a coffee and go through your business plan or your brand as an artist. So, yeah, thank you.
Are you angels as well?
Angels?
Angels, you know.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe later.
Okay.
Thank you. If you have any questions.
So I think that many questions we threw over you already during but any further question to Mario?
You have a question there, please?
I was just referring to the consultation. Are you based now in Berlin? or-
Berlin, yeah. Yeah, we're based in Kreuzberg, close to the Visionaire.
I'm visiting
Yeah.
here.
Görlitzer Park. Okay. Everyone knows Görlitzer Park.
Mr. Mario is coming from New York
From
for
here.
a few
okay.
days,
Okay.
but if you need help, I will. The
Yeah.
Plaza Visionaire
There is a lot of
closed already,
inspiration
no?
in that district.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Unfortunately.
it got burned
Yeah.
last
Yeah, I
time.
know. Yeah, it was good place.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway, but it's a cool area in
There are a lot
general.
of providers.
Arena also next to it and so on.
Yeah,
Fadi, if you want to meet him before you are coming back to New York, Fadi
Yeah.
is a great, great
definitely,
artist.
definitely.
The art, what I told you, you
Yeah,
miss the
I missed
performance.
it, unfortunately, yeah.
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 So, but will be if you,
Yeah.
It's an area now.
Thank you. This is very beautiful.
Thank you.
I think a lot of artists feel left out in the creative process
Yeah.
when they're young
Yeah,
because of not knowing that they can take initiatives and
yeah, yeah.
they can turn the great idea into a resourceful
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Exactly.
And I think creating this platform is important.
Yeah, thank
it's a
you.
beautiful, it's a beautiful social project,
Yeah.
so to say. It's also connected a little bit to what we spoke about before.
Yeah.
And, it's like it's a win-win situation.
Exactly.
It's like Pareto in economics,
Yeah,
so to
exactly,
say.
exactly.
Nobody can lose from that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's a great startup.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Is it already worldwide?
No, we're mainly Europe. Our main markets are Portugal and Germany. We're trying to go into Austria now. But yeah, step by step.
Okay. Yeah. No, I wonder if it fits every society. That's why I was thinking
think
about the
So
horticulture.
yeah, I mean, we have bookings in a lot of different places, but we have to focus. As a startup, you need to learn that you need to focus,
Yeah.
and that's what we're doing.
Okay. If you ever need some in Israel, let me know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We are known for our startup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true.
But it's an interesting idea. I didn't hear, but I'm not in this so much in this world. Yeah, but yeah. So I think that now we can, if we don't have any question, Mario, you are welcome to stay with us because the next lecture is going to be also about the creative industries from Professor Vele. And we are happy to hear his perspective because it's a little bit connecting also to one each other. So thank you again very much to Mario.